Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's October 16th, 2024. I'm your host, Eric Ostrom. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator focused on AWS infrastructure that helps teams deploy their software faster. And we do this by leveraging our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 100 million times. So no matter where you find yourself on this journey, we're here to help you launch better products faster. So just head over to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. Answer a few quick questions and you'll book a meeting with me directly. So how can you maximize today's session? Well, first off, our format's very informal. You can engage as much as you'd like. You can ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, just go for it. And for those of you on the recording, we do host these calls live. You can join us by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's office hours valuable, go ahead and share it with your team. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse and you'll find this recording posted there in a couple of hours. So it's a great way to spread the knowledge amongst your team and get the word out there. So with that said, let's get into the news and announcements. All right, first one is something we brought up, I think, last week. Just a heads up, we did relaunch cloudposse.com. So if you haven't checked out our new site, do so. It's just cloudposse.com. I welcome all feedback, and we put a lot of effort into this, and hopefully it's a lot more clear how we can be of service to your organization. Next up was wrong one there. So Matt Calhoun shared this link with me, and I thought this was really interesting. As you know, one of the themes here in Office Hours is helping companies be aware of how they can support open source. Cloud Posse is, of course, an open source organization in the sense that everything we work is more or less open source. It's public on our GitHub, and we provide support on top of that, and that's our kind of business model. One of the things that we've been working with over the past year is making it easier for companies to sponsor Cloud Posse on GitHub. And GitHub has the ability to connect your organization directly with a GitHub sponsorship. So this is another initiative that I like, and this is drawing recognition to companies who are pledging to support open source. And the site is opensourcepledge.com, and anyone can join this pledge. And the TLDR is written out here. Basically, commit to spending about $2,000 per year per developer at your company. And then just publish a blog post, outlining how you are supporting open source. And then you can submit your company to the list. And here's a list of all the other companies that have joined this pledge already. So Sentry is donating $3,700 per developer. So that's a serious donation from Sentry. So pretty impressive there. And this is in general to open source. They talk about how you can promote this as well. So you can join this pledge and create this JSON file that you host at an endpoint. I forget where you should put that file. But that's basically how the protocol for how you distribute your contribution to open source. And what I like about this is this is a way to really highlight the companies that are doing their part in supporting open source, and that I can stand for. Any questions on this? I'd be curious about any companies doing this already in some capacity. Are your companies, do you know of your companies supporting some of the open source that you're leveraging? All right. Well, let's move on. So the next one was just a little piece that I found interesting. It was a write-up about a little known segment of security researchers or teams that actually do physical penetration testing. So this is breaking into headquarters, factories, facilities, and things like that, and the tricks that they use. Nothing really revolutionary. And I mean, if you've seen this written up before, the techniques seem like they haven't changed too much. I just wonder, you got to have nerves of steel to be able to do this kind of a job. I would not be good at this. Michael Rosenfeld, do you know any red teamers?
Sorry. Yeah, I do. I actually used to work on the Coast Guard's red team, so it was a good time, but we didn't do much on the physical side.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. Next announcement was I thought this was I didn't realize how cool I would think this was until I started thinking about it a little bit more. So at this point, I think a lot of the developers are familiar with Mermaid. Mermaid is a simple way to express um, an architecture in a markdown friendly way. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be markdown. Now GitHub supports Mermaid.js, and you can do that in your READMEs, and you've probably seen these diagrams start popping up. So Mermaid got its start as a JavaScript library that you can just embed on your site and then convert, this simple markup into a pretty um, canvas-based diagram. Now, with this library, you can do that on the console. So you can use still this really friendly syntax that we know and love and produce this output. And not only that, but it supports Golang. So you could generate in your code a simple diagram like this, and then your CLI can produce an architecture diagram. And given that I think, fancy CLIs are making a resurgence and more investment is being placed on the developer experience for that, this is another tool in your tool belt to improve your CLI's uh, user experience. Any thoughts or input on this? I could see this being pretty cool for Atmos to visualize the dependencies between components in a stack. All right, next announcement. Oh, this was exciting news. So you'll remember maybe a few weeks ago in office hours, we talked about somebody who wrote a backend implementation using the HTTP provider so that you can use Cloudflare and Cloudflare workers as a backend for your Terraform. Now, the quality of that was, of course, more at POC quality at best. And one of the big limitations of using that approach with the HTTP provider and Terraform backends is the authentication piece of that it only supports basic auth. So trying to do any fancier methods of authentication for your backend are difficult. That's why using like the S3 backend is so nice because it just works with your IAM credentials. Well, someone posted on that a link to this pull request, which was really exciting. So the other thing we announced, I don't know if it was a month or two ago, is that S3 finally supports conditional writes. And one of the cool use cases for conditional writes is to implement the locking semantics by writing a file conditionally if the file doesn't exist. So it's leveraging conditional writes on Amazon S3 to write a lock file. And if that succeeds, then you have exclusive write to that workspace. And This is this says a draft. I think they just forgot to remove the word draft before merging it. And I believe it is an experimental feature that will be released very shortly. And this is in the Terraform core, so that might not be, supported yet in OpenTofu. I haven't looked to see. Let's see if there's a OpenTofu. Yep. So there's a corresponding pull request open for OpenTofu to add that same support. So pretty cool. Any questions on this, or questions on like why this is a nice to have? All right. This, of course, simplifies S3 backends because an S3 backend was never just an S3 backend. It required a DynamoDB to do state locking. So with this, you just need the same bucket you use for your state files can now also be used for locking. And that's really nice, leveraging the same IAM permissions and one less thing you need to provision when you provision your state backends. All right. Next announcement, Michael, you shared this one. I can barely believe the truth on this, but Amazon says 175 million customers have now set up passkeys to log in on AWS. No, it's not on Amazon, not on AWS. And I just find that amazing that they could convince 175 million non-techie people to get that set up. I guess it's just that easy to set up now. Michael, any other thoughts on this one? All right. The next announcement was one that just caught my eye today. This has been talked about for a long time, but I think this is finally actually happening. And while not really, tech or industry related to what we do, I think everyone can rejoice if making cancellations is now going to be uh, legislated to be or required to be an easy process. Nothing worse than having a super easy way to sign up and you gotta, gyms are the worst case example, right? Where you gotta write a written letter signed and notarized in order to cancel your gym membership or something. So, however easy it is to sign up, you got to make it just as easy to cancel. And the last announcement I had was just this one, trending on Hacker News as well. I had never heard of ArchiveBox, and I thought that was kind of cool because I've always wanted to have an easy way to have local mirrors of the sites or resources that I like. I've been using Evernote's web clipper for a decade now, and that's pretty convenient. I think this sounds better, for an organization to have this approach. It's almost like you can have an artifactory of uh, the content that you source in your documentation or otherwise. Um, you might have heard of archive.org sustaining a pretty punishing DOS attack. I don't know if that was a week or two ago. And as a result of that, this project has also received a bit more attention. Let's see. One correction, I believe last week I talked about the Atlantis project, and it was announced that their Slack is moving over to the CNCF, and that's true. And I also thought I mistakenly said that the repository was moving over, but hadn't. Well, it turns out it has, just not the way I was looking at it. So Pepe corrected me and let me know that the Atlantis organization, Run Atlantis, is now transferred over to the CNCF. So the CNCF runs as a GitHub enterprise and can have any number of member organizations underneath there, with Run Atlantis now being one of those. Any other news and announcements related to the CNCF and Atlantis, Pepe, that we should discuss?
It's just a slow process.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to actually. If anyone wants to do that with their project, is be prepared for the amount of work you have to do. This is quite a big challenge, and plus you have to think that there are a lot of volunteers and people. They're overcommit on the CNCF side too. So there's
Yeah.
always a huge back and forth and so on. So yeah. So like Slack channels, for example, migrations should have taken a week, but this is the fourth week and we are still going back and forth in the details and things. So it takes quite a lot of time until we actually finish the sandbox process. And yeah.
Regarding the Slack channel, is it more than just a channel on the CNCF Slack org, or is it?
No. It's just it's on the CNCF Slack org, but we usually you migrate messages and users
Oh,
over, and the importing process is a bit convoluted, so that's why it takes a while to
how's
do
that?
that.
So you do basically a Slack export from the current
Hmm.
team, and then but how do they import it on their end? I didn't believe there was any way
I
to.
There is a way. I don't know what magic they use, but I'm not doing the import. I just did the export. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, that is it for my prepared announcements. Jonathan, I know you were excited to hear about HashiCorp or HashiConf discussions. Unfortunately, I've not been able to look at any of the announcements there. If anybody else has been, happy to turn the mic over and see and get an update. Any interesting announcements from HashiConf or topics worth discussion? Not sure if you heard that, Jonathan, if you are there or not. All right,
I
there's.
am here. Unfortunately, I'm in a noisy room. Um,
Okay, gotcha.
it's just that they've gone huge on this idea of scaling up Terraform, and I was somewhat overbooked, so I was kind of listening with just one ear, but I was really taken with how equivalent or equal all of their concepts were to Cloud Posse concepts. The
Yeah,
modules and components and stacks, and it felt like they were recapitulating your architectural discoveries about how to scale up Terraform. I don't know that they'll have done it in precisely the same details in every step, but was pretty remarkable how architecturally consistent they were with your approach.
yeah, it really does seem, I guess it's validating, if anything, that HashiCorp in their latest stacks offering has really borrowed on the concepts that I think I don't want to take credit for pioneering them. I think all we've done at Cloud Posse is take what everyone said, everyone who's been doing Terraform for a long time has recognized a lot of problems with Terraform. One is that when your Terraform code gets too big, it gets very slow to plan and apply. It can require 30 gigs of RAM to just run a plan. And that's if you don't hit API rate limits in the process. So decomposing your Terraform architecture, your infrastructure into smaller pieces has always been one of the common recommendations. The challenge that we encountered with that at Cloud Posse is one of these things. Everyone says that this is what you should do, but there was never really any tooling that just made that happen that way. Tooling like TerraGrunt certainly is influential. I don't believe has been as prescriptive and idiomatic in how to do that. And what we decided at Cloud Posse and Atmos when we wrote it was being very prescriptive and deliberate about how an architecture is decomposed into its pieces, and those pieces being things like components, and then composing all those components together in a stack. And then you take one of those components and in a stack and you deploy it. And that's what HashiCorp has done. in the commercial offering of Terraform Cloud, and that's what they're calling these various pieces. So pretty similar to what we do at Cloud Posse, at least in spirit.
Yeah. I was also they have a new feature they talked about as kind of deferred runs, running the way they talked about it in the keynote, part of a plan and then deferring part of a plan, and then running and applying part 2 of your plan later. So, sounded like a little auto magic to work around circular dependencies or
Yeah.
but I kind of thought that the pitch was magical. I also can imagine a lot of ways that will go off the rails or become so basically indeterminate or confusing in practice. But that's just an impression. I have not looked at the product. I've just heard the promises.
So yeah, I guess I think what's interesting based on what you said is I think it's interesting to look at it for inspiration. Ultimately, the fact that so much of what we do is based on open source, the requirement of a commercial platform is kind of against the spirit of that in order to run it. But yeah, obviously I do want HashiCorp to do well, and I do want HashiCorp to be able to commercialize its products and find ways to monetize them. And I think this is great. I think it's going to be good for their customers that they provide these mechanisms because it's worked. I mean, aside from the deferred things that you talked about there, I think the other concepts have worked really well for us. So that is interesting about deferring plans or partial plans and so forth. I've seen some things around Terraform open source on the CLI side that let you very easily select which you basically check off, yep, I want that resource, I want that resource, I want that resource in a text-based UI, and then click apply. And it kind of makes me think of that at a sophisticated level compared to what I've described here as a primitive implementation of that. Don't know. I can see why that would be a requested feature. We almost never run into those issues with proper design of components. So less inclined to look into that right now. Any other observers of HashiConf? Any interesting announcements or discussions? All right. Rishav, if I am not mistaken, I think you might have had some questions based on a discussion in the Office Hours channel.
Yeah, I did actually. It was just general observations on the HashiConf stuff. I thought it was a wee bit light on Terraform specifics. But in any case, the question I had was more around GitHub Actions, and I was just wanting to get a finger on the pulse on what's the general recommendation with regards to I want to create a plan, view the output in a PR, approve it, and then when I merge it, I have it applied. Not even getting into the nitty-gritty of should we merge and apply before and after, but just
You've seen that conversation already.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't even want to get into that, but just the sake of I think
Pepe, because we have Pepe here, able to defend one side of that, and I can defend the other.
Yes.
I will say one thing is that I've noticed a few teams, even Imam at Voltaire, is after a plan, if it looks good, they apply, but it's with auto approve, and that always looks a bit risky, a wee bit dodgy to me. I get why they do it because they can't store the plan file anywhere, but that always seems a bit iffy. But that was exactly why I was wanting to get an idea.
That's the kicker, right? What you described is the kicker, and that's what most of the open source GitHub Actions don't do is
right.
anything with the plan file, and they just it's a best effort, plan, and apply phase. So best effort, here's the plan, best effort. You like that, we'll merge, we'll auto approve it, but we're not actually auto approve. We're not actually applying exactly what you approve. We are
Right.
hoping optimistically that it's the same thing.
And to be fair to them, there sometimes isn't a way to, because for example, if you're initializing an EC2 instance, there is no guarantee that the subnet has enough capacity until you apply it.
No, that's true. And plans are, what's the word I'm looking for? Optimistic at best, either way,
Right.
right? Like you said, subnet capacity, instance types, there's a lot of things that aren't validated. So real world Terraform means you need to assume there will be failures, and you need to improve the DX so that when there are failures, there's recourse on what you do. So in our model, what we do in our GitHub actions at Cloud Posse, which are also open source and do these things, we open up GitHub issues. So if there's a failure after merge to main, we open up a GitHub issue so you can track that and assign it to an engineer to go and look into. So no failure is left behind.
Nice. Gotcha. Interesting. And if it does fail, does that mean the PR still gets merged, or does that
Well,
get rejected?
so this is it's unavoidable.
All right,
Before or after merge, right? So there are two sides to this coin. The one side of the coin that we practice is we apply after merge, and by doing so, we've committed to those changes. Like think of just the grammatical implications of commit, right?
Right.
So we are committing to these changes. Now they might fail, just like in life. When you commit to something, they might fail. And we do that after we merge into main. And then if there's a failure, we create an issue, and then we can assign that and have somebody look into that. Now,
Gotcha.
the other workflow that Pepe ascribes to, and look, this is not a criticism. This is not backhanded. This is not, there's no such thing as solutions. There are only trade-offs. And what I've described has one set of trade-offs, and one of the alternatives to this, and why Atlantis has been very popular. So Pepe is one of the core maintainers of Atlantis, and but also a big user of Cloud Posse's open source, including our GitHub actions. So he has seen both sides of this coin. And in Atlantis, the whole idea, right, is that you don't merge until after successful apply, and that way you use the gating mechanism of pull request to do that. That has other trade-offs in that what you can end up doing is, remember what we were just talking about with Jonathan about at Eunice about the announcement at HashiConf about deferred plans or applies, I forget exactly. And here's the deal. If you do this in a pull request, what you can easily do is create a component or create a root module that the following happens. I apply it. Part of it applies successfully, but then it fails. Ah, crap. I do what every engineer does at that point. I rerun the command, Atlantis, apply. Now it works.
I thought you were going to cry, but okay.
And now it works. And now what we've done is by the act of applying it twice, we have what seems to be a working root module that's been successfully applied. But now when we go to staging and deploy it, it's going to fail again because we actually didn't fix it. What we've done is we've created something that works only on a two-phased apply. So in our approach, what we don't do that. So in our approach, what would happen, we apply after merge. It's still going to fail, but guess what? You're going to realize that now, and you're going to have to actually fix the underlying problem. And hopefully that doesn't, progress all the way through. So it doesn't eliminate the problems. It just makes certain problems more cumbersome so that you want to fix them.
And there is things that you can do in the Atlantis side of way where you merge after you apply before merge. Where you can actually say, for example, like imagine if you, like the example that Eric is taking, it's like you change an underlying module, but if you are actually vendoring the modules, like creating versions of the module, you can actually avoid a lot of those problems, and you can go through a release of the module version PR before it gets moved to other environments. So there is ways to go around that problem to have less of that issue. In Atlantis, for example, when you create a plan, it will discard the latest plan, which was actually a problem before too. You could actually potentially apply a stale plan. That doesn't happen anymore. You do one change, you create a new plan. So basically, once you merge, it will actually, once you decide to apply it, it will be the closest to main possible at that point, or to your main branch, default branch. So.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Nice one. Thank you. I had two follow-up questions just about plan file handling and the use of merge queues, but I'll come back to that later if there is time at the end.
So that's the one thing. So we handle the plan file thing in our GitHub actions. So if you look at the Atmos GitHub actions, what we did is we came up with the concept of a meta storage database.
Right.
And that's pluggable. We support, so I forget what the thing is called on Azure, but we support whatever Azure has that's comparable to
blob storage containers. Yeah.
Okay, blob storage containers. And so we support that. However, what we haven't looked into yet, and I'm really curious about, are merge queues together with this. And merge queues, I believe, only work if you are actually using GitHub Actions, and they plug into basically the events system in GitHub Actions. So it's only possible if you use GitHub Actions, and not possible if you use a third-party system like Atlantis, M0, etc.
Gotcha. Because that was exactly the kind of crossroads we were at, is that we're already invested into GitHub Actions. All of our CICD relies on it. Our code lives in GitHub. Why not really lean into it? So along with GitHub Actions, the thing I've been working on is, what if we just use GitHub repository artifacts to store the plan file and use some kind of clever naming scheme so that when you have multiple PRs, the PR always identifies the correct plan file artifact, so that when you come to apply it, whether that's before the merge, after the merge, using merge queues, the right plan file gets used as part of the apply. That was the kind of running idea that I'm going with. But yeah, I wonder if that's something you've had looked into.
Again, there are trade-offs with that, and that's one we have looked into it. I think we've time boxed it to only about a day or so as it relates to that. But let me explain some of the problems you might run into. Maybe you figured out a way around it already. So what we ran into are the following. So the first one is pretty obvious that, well, that might not work for everyone because the plan files can have sensitive values. If your plan files are going to have sensitive values, then that's kind of out the door. Unless you do something more complicated, you can AMS encrypt your plan files, attach the encrypted form as an artifact, detach it, or fetch it on your apply stage, use KMS to decrypt it. That way you can use the artifact system if you want to, but you still need to really use encryption in order to ensure the sanctity of those artifacts.
Great point.
Let's assume that's not an issue, or let's assume you're going to use the ephemeral values thing that's coming out or has come out. I don't know if it's been released yet, but it's something that I think HashiCorp is working on. In that case, with ephemeral values, your sensitive values can never have to live in state, but it's not a guarantee there won't be sensitive values in there. All right, that aside, the fetching the artifact, this is the one thing I wish was a lot easier to do. What we found difficult was so you merge that PR into main. Now you need to find the artifact of that pull request that was at the right commit, and then fetch that. And I believe the system, the ability to fetch an artifact that way was not very easy when we looked into it. I'm sure it can be accomplished, but you're definitely going to have to write something up in TypeScript that uses the GitHub API and iterates over a number of pull requests and artifacts and things like that to get what you're looking for.
You're spot on both fronts. Yeah, the plan file encryption, that was a big worry for us as well immediately. Part of it was, well, it's all exposed in the workflow log anyway, so what does it matter if it's in an artifact? But at the same time...
It's different though. Yeah. So the output is different. The output is pretty much safe. It's pretty sane. Unless in your actual Terraform outputs, you have a sensitive value that is not marked sensitive, then your Terraform output, well, it's a little bit confusing how I said it. If you have outputs that are not marked sensitive, your output in your GitHub action logs could have sensitive data. So, but that's relatively easy to mitigate.
Sure.
Have the proper checks in place. The bigger thing is like, let's say you are provisioning an RDS database and you generate a random password and you use the random because you cannot create an RDS database without a master password.
Right.
So that's an example of where, well, now your state has a password in it. And what some people have done, they have like a Lambda go and immediately rotate it. But anyways, that's a complicated Rube Goldberg apparatus that you shouldn't have to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a reasonable, a common request you would expect to. And also there is, I think, the trust element as well. Just allowing a GitHub action to kind of crawl through your Terraform, your plans, your outputs, handling the artifacts. There is a little bit of, I guess, auditing you should do before that.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that isn't talked about enough is the only way to do this securely is to, if you're using GitHub Actions, is to use pull request target events and not pull request events.
Right.
Because if you use pull request events, you can modify the workflow in your PR to do whatever you want. But with pull request target, it only works in the main branch. And then the other thing you need to do is restrict your GitHub OADC to have different permissions on different branches. Because otherwise somebody can just open up a shadow branch, a branch that's never PR'd even, and just deleted, but they can do whatever they want in that branch and leverage your GitHub OIDC credentials to do whatever they want. So there's security implications, and the ability to tie GitHub OIDC to a branch, I believe, is supported even on GitHub Teams. But to do any more restrictive permissions on branches. For example, if you want to restrict secrets to certain branches, you have to use GitHub Enterprise.
Right, I see. Like using environment deployment protection and environment specific variables.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. Alrighty, fair play. I'll be tinkering with this project. Hopefully by the next Cloud Posse office hours.
Okay, yeah. Let us know how it goes. It's a pretty, as more and more people are venturing down the path of running their own GitHub Actions for this, it's a pretty common.
That's exactly it. And I have no
conversation.
doubt this is going to be one of those. There are 14 standards. I'll introduce one to fix everything. Now there are 15 standards.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll try our best. Thank you, though. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, sounds good, Rishal. Glad you were able to join and ask. Any other questions we can get to today? Come on, Mikhat, you always have one for me.
I had one as soon as you joined, and I forgot it. So
Okay.
Trying to think.
I'll come back to you.
There's a lot of smart people on this call, so someone should take advantage of it.
Yep. All right. Any other questions?
I have a different tangent just about dependency updates and handling that. So far with Terraform, we've kind of offloaded that worry to Dependabot, just given it the old directory, and we upload the log file, and Dependabot takes care of fetching new provider versions and module versions from us. No worries there, pretty straightforward, and because it's all via pull request, we can verify the new updates before merging it in. But I was curious, for one thing, I haven't seen OpenTofu have their own version of the provider, and that wasn't initially an issue, but it is now since OpenTofu does the early static variable interpolation. It means if your provider version or even module version is a variable, now you're out of luck. The Terraform updater doesn't know how to parse it, and OpenTofu doesn't have one. And I was curious if this is something that you've run into or just not yet.
There is a temporary, or there's at least an immediate workaround that you can do so that you get some of that functionality back. So if you want to stick with Dependabot, you can just rename those files that use that functionality to .otf or something, or .tofu, maybe it was the extension, I forget. But You just, after the .tf, just add .tofu, I think. And then OpenTofu will read those files, but Terraform and any Terraform tooling will not read those files. So that allows you to support both.
Oh, so you can almost have like a shadow version of the providers where Dependabot says
Yeah.
only has the Terraform version, it will update its ones, and when we're ready, we can manually copy over into the Tofu ones.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an ideal. It's not what you're asking, but
it is a workable solution. That's fair.
what's it? I mean, if it's any saving grace, Microsoft, multiple Microsoft Terraform developers have been submitting their keys to the OpenTofu registry. So Tofu is being taken seriously inside Microsoft. But yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if one can find a Dependabot issue on what you're talking about, because that's going to come up. What I would recommend otherwise as your alternative right now is either switching entirely over to Renovate and Renovate bot, or the things that you want to try and solve right now, you can solve using I forget what the term is in Renovate, but basically the Regex provider or something in.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I've
Yes.
heard that solution as well. Some folks mention
Okay.
Renovate. Out of curiosity, is Renovate free to use, or is there like licensing involved?
Can someone, I always gets messed up with this. Everything we do is open source, so it almost never affects us. Anyone know the answer to this one?
Yeah, so I've actually used the free, you install the app and it onboards itself. And then more recently, I've gone with the self-hosted version. I wanted to use it in private repositories, and it's free. There are some configurations to deal with. And are you looking to do this on a public repo or a private repo?
Private, unfortunately.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll send you over how we set ours up. I actually more recently I made a huge switch this past weekend on it, and we used to copy our Renovate configuration to every repo. And I saw that you're doing the centralized approach, Derek, and so we're doing the same thing. On top of that, we're actually not even defining a Renovate config anymore. We're able to pass that in as an environment variable. So there's no more. So we have like one really massive configuration, and we're just versioning that. So yeah, if you send me a Slack in the sweetops channel, you should be able to find me pretty easily. I will send you over our configurations. And Eric, if it's of interest to you as well, for any private repos, happy to share that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd like to see that. So are you using the GitHub app on a private repo, or are you using the GitHub action in a private repo?
Just the GitHub action for now. Oh, sorry.
I got the Docker container from Gitbot, and I feed in environment variables. And
okay, so you're using the GitHub action approach.
Yes, but it's not as clean as the GitHub action. We are using, I believe right now it's a personal access token. So we've created a Renovate service account. So there are some caveats depending on how many repositories you have. With a PAT, you only get 5,000 requests per hour. And yeah, so we're scheduling it as a cron in Kubernetes. To do an app and self-host it is challenging. You need something to update the token on some regular interval. In GitHub Actions, they've got a script or something already in place.
Why not run it as a GitHub action, a scheduled GitHub action?
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think part of the issue I ran into that I'm not really using scheduled GitHub Actions is they don't run at a guaranteed time, and so that created some problems for me more recently. In this case, I actually don't need it to run on time every time. Like it can run whenever it runs, like ideally once a day. So I should probably switch over to that. I just have to look at, honestly, I probably should just switch over. I just need to check to see if the app token works as expected. So I haven't tested that at all.
So what I was going to say is switch it over to a GitHub action that runs on a schedule. And if you are at liberty to mark your other repositories as internal, then you can just use the GitHub token that is auto-issued and you don't need a PAT.
Oh, I just posted that, Eric, in my conversation about vendoring. I just did that. I'm actually type in the action right now that Eric is
Does that work
describing.
or?
Yeah, so there is
Okay.
an action called create GitHub app token, which is managed by GitHub, which actually creates the JWT token and the installation ID for that GitHub action created manually, and then you use that token to pass as the GitHub token environment
Oh
variable
yeah. So that's
down
one.
to
That's,
your steps.
well, yeah. So that's one option as well, and we use that at Cloud Posse. And if you do that though, Pepe, you need to make sure that the secrets that you're using for that GitHub app are in an environment, a GitHub environment, but protected by a GitHub Enterprise Environment Protection Rule. Otherwise, anybody with access to that repo, right access to that repo, can get those tokens and create any token they want just by creating a
Interesting.
branch, because any branch has access to secrets in a GitHub repo.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
So
I'm about to do that now.
So we've implemented this at Cloud Posse. We've created a bunch of apps. We've created a release app. We've created a security app. We've created, I forget the other apps, but each one of those apps has a limited scope. And then we put the installation ID and those secrets that you need to use that app in an environment, but that environment is pinned to the default branch so that it is impossible for a developer to just open a branch and exfiltrate those secrets. And that we can do securely, and then we can generate those ephemeral tokens for any repo that we want, like you're talking about. My assertion though, Pepe, was, and I could be wrong on this, I thought this is how it works, what I'm about to say. If you mark a GitHub repository as internal, so GitHub has 3 states: public repos, private repos, and internal repos. Internal are only available on GitHub Enterprises. But I thought that an internal repo is a public repo to your organization. But it's private to the outside world, meaning no one else can see it. And if you do that, that might be sufficient level of access for what you're trying to do. And then you can just use the auto-generated token that you get automatically with GitHub Actions to clone that repo without any of this other machinery.
One thing to note for that is that I recently am working on some workflows that work in a centralized repository for an organization. And that centralized repository is a private repository. It's not internal. But the other repositories in that same organization are able to read it just with the default token as well.
Oh, they were?
Yeah. They don't need anything special.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, then maybe it doesn't even need to be marked internal then. I thought that was the case, but I could be wrong.
I was surprised that it worked, to be honest.
But wait a second. You're saying that you are actually cloning another repo from another repo? That's the action you are doing?
Essentially, yes. So we have we have a private repository that's inside the organization.
Yeah.
And it has some reusable GitHub workflows inside of it. Then in the other workflows, we're able to call the reusable workflows. So we're not really cloning it.
Okay, that's
But
like
wait, that's different. Are you
Yeah.
using the .github repository within the
Yes.
org?
Yes.
Okay,
so
that's
exactly,
a special that doesn't need the token, but any other any other private repo will require a token, because the token is scoped to the repo of the action token is scoped to the repo where it's running.
Right.
So it
right.
doesn't allow another repo to clone another private repo. So the idea of the internal repos that Eric is talking about, if it doesn't require another token, that would be awesome, actually. And I did all this work for nothing, but that's okay. That happens very often.
Hold on. I'm just doing a quick sanity check. There could be no. Okay, so according to ChatGPT, I'm probably wrong. So don't invest too much into it. But I thought that's how it would work. So I'm just hoping GitHub. I hope I'm not the one hallucinating. I hope it's the one hallucinating. All right. Yeah, so maybe my whole big thing there was all made up, but all right, sounded good. All right, let's move on and spare me the embarrassment.
I think someone in the chat was asking a question around how to break
Okay.
up a monolithic Terraform state.
All right, let's see here. I'm getting caught up here. I'm dealing with inherited Terraform code that I need to upgrade, but the process is complicated by mismatches between the AWS provider version, the state version, and the Terraform Cloud and the Cloud Posse module version. It looks like they have been heavily relying on targeted TF apply commands, which is not uncommon. Yeah, sadly not uncommon, which has now made a full Terraform apply runs impossible. This also relates to that thing I was talking about. Like if you're using Atlantis and like doing iterative applies, you can eventually get something to work that is actually unapplicable without targeted applies. Which has now made full Terraform applies impossible. I'm looking for advisors' suggestions on how to untangle and resolve this situation. So yeah, this is. I think we need to start by just asking some more qualifying questions. And the first would be, I assume this is in production. I assume that these are things you could not do a clean destroy at some point and recreate. Is there a tolerance for downtime? Do you need to do this live and in place and, state surgery? I know that was a mouthful. Aaron, are you able to share some more context?
Yeah, sure. It is in production.
Okay.
And I'm pretty much to the point of just, deleting the state and just manually building everything.
Yeah.
So that may be the only thing I can do.
So here's one idea, the one way you could approach this. So, and to the extent this will work, your mileage may vary, but in a perfect world, first think about what your ideal decomposition would be, breaking it down into multiple root modules or components. Re-implement the functionality into those, and then use the programmatic imports to import those resources into the state. Now what's going to happen is you can actually have that. This is not what you're going to want to do, but you can actually have that managed simultaneously by two different Terraforms because you've imported it. Obviously, as soon as you start doing it in one, you're going to delete the other state file so you don't make a mistake. But what you can do at this point is you can iterate now on your new components that you've developed until you have more or less feature parity with what is deployed. So meaning when you run a plan, there should be no changes, or the changes you see are hopefully benign changes with no actual production impact or recreation of resources. If you can get it to the point there's no recreation of resources, now you've done a successful migration.
That sounds good.
If that'll actually work, it's who knows.
Mileage will vary. Thank you.
Yeah, your mileage will vary. Yeah. Cloud Posse provides professional services. I'm joking. No, we only provide professional services for moving into our module ecosystem and Atmos and everything like that. All right, let's see. Was there any? So Zach, you said something. Sure, this has been covered before. Sorry,
we've got like 5 minutes, and I don't think this can be covered in 5 minutes. I recall my question. So
okay,
I'll do everyone a solid with that. So,
well, it's a great question. Are you able to join next week?
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right, why don't you re-ask that next week, and that's a good topic of conversation. Basically, how to decompose an architecture in a way that makes it conducive for different teams with different responsibilities to manage their part of it, their slice.
Yeah, they need to own their own state. And it's hard to carve out depending on what kind of state you're carving out. So,
yeah. Is this something you're tasked with solving? Or?
No, it's just something that would really make my life a lot easier if I could get it accomplished. And either way, so it's it would overcome some monolithic type of upper limits that you run into with Terraform that I've been hitting. So,
all right. All right. Well, we are at time. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. And we will pick back up next week at the same time, same place. So if you haven't yet subscribed to our weekly office hours, you can do so by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. We'll be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse in a couple of hours. So if there's something interesting there you want to share with your team, that's the best way to go about it. If you're interested in working with Cloud Posse, hiring us at your business to kind of move the needle, book a call with me directly. Go to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. Answer a few quick questions and you'll book a meeting with me directly. Here's some other action items. If you want to get more involved in our community and everything that we provide, we have a podcast, we have a newsletter, and we have our Slack team. So lots of ways to stay in touch, and see you around. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your week and see you next week.